So to begin our webinar focused on manure application planning with the Michigan Enviro Impact Tool, we would like to introduce ourselves. So my name is Megan Goss, and I serve with Michigan State University Extension and Michigan Sea Grant in the Saginaw Bay region of Michigan. So right here.
And I'm Erica Rogers. I'm also with Michigan State University Extension. I'm an environmental management educator. So I do a lot with manure management, odor management, and mortality management, as well as water quality and nutrient management. I'm located in Alma, which is the smack dab middle of the state of Michigan and the Lower Peninsula, but I do have statewide responsibilities. Okay, so some of the things we're going to talk about in the webinar today will specifically be manure application, nutrient runoff, regional runoff risk decision support tools, the Michigan Enviro Impact Tool and the specifics surrounding that tool, and then we'll have some time for questions at the end as well. So what do we know about manure application? Well, manure application can be used as an alternative fertilizer source, and a lot of livestock operations have manure readily available for this purpose. Some of the planning considerations that we want to think about with manure application and nutrient application as well are what the storage capacities are. So how much manure storage capacity does a storage actually have? What are the slope and drainage of the fields that are intended to be used for that manure application? What are some of the weather forecasts and seasonal conditions? So is it a dry summer versus a wet winter? What is the snow or water saturation level in the fields? And then what kind of manure is being applied, whether that's a solid type manure or if it's a liquid type manure, as those can act differently in fields.
But at the same time, when applying nutrients, there is a risk for nutrient runoff. When it rains, nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus can wash into nearby waterways as runoff. In Michigan, most of our rivers and streams flow directly to the Great Lakes. So this is something that when thinking about land use, it's important to consider application and the timing of application because both of those can contribute to nutrient runoff. In the Great Lakes, excess nutrients can lead to plant and algae overgrowth. And with this excessive overgrowth of cyanobacteria or a blue-green algae, harmful algal blooms can occur. There are a number of different factors influencing the growth of harmful algal blooms, including agricultural runoff, urban runoff, and septic systems, and also shorebird droppings. But harmful algal blooms can have a big impact on watershed health and the Great Lakes. When they decompose, they can consume oxygen fish and other aquatic organisms need to survive. They can also degrade the quality of our drinking water, and some harmful algal blooms also produce toxins that can cause illness or irritation in pets, livestock, and humans. So to address this issue, multiple partners across the Great Lakes Basin have developed regional runoff risk decision support tools to reduce nutrient loss in runoff events. These tools use NOAA National Weather Service modeling, on-farm research data, and they involve multiple partner collaboration. And this is supported by the Environmental Protection Agency, Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, NOAA, the National Weather Service, North Central River Forecast Center. And in today's webinar, we're going to be focusing on one of the tools that was developed as a part of this regional effort, the Michigan Enviro Impact Tool.
So what is the Michigan Enviro Impact Tool? This tool is a decision support tool to help plan short-term manure and fertilizer application to reduce the loss of nutrients from fields. So the tool itself was developed by the National Weather Service in conjunction with NOAA. And the runoff risk itself, the forecast is derived from real-time precipitation and temperature forecasts from the National Weather Service. So this data is combined with snowmelt, soil moisture, and landscape characteristics to help forecast specific runoff events. This modeling was verified with a small sample validation study that included edge of the field sites, so monitoring of those sites. One of the sites was in Michigan. So essentially, when you look at the tool itself, it's basically divided up into grids that are each 4 kilometers by 4 kilometers, or about 6 square miles. And there are about 31 grid cells that contain 50 edge of the field monitoring sites for this validation. Ideally, the developers of these tools are looking to do a 30-year retrospective run with new historical findings so that they can update those new grid thresholds, but they don't think it's going to make any real significant changes. So we're pretty excited with where they have it right now. So if you'll notice, one of the first tabs you can go to, and it's kind of highlighted in a red box on the top, is the precipitation layer. So essentially, this layer shows the amount of precipitation that's expected over the next 24 hours. Something important to remember about this is that the modeling used in the precipitation layer is deterministic in forecast run, so meaning it doesn't necessarily include the likelihood of precipitation, or i.e. the percent of precipitation. So that's just something to consider. The next layer that you will notice is soil temperature. So there is soil temperature at 2 inches, and then you'll notice to the right there's also the soil temperature at 4 inches. The differences are pretty little, so we're just going to focus on the 2-inch soil temperature for this webinar specifically, but both tabs do exist if you're curious. So this model uses forecasted precipitation and temperatures, so it's simplified this way in order to run the model in real time across a larger region. The next layer that you can look at is the soil saturation. So how wet, how saturated is that soil that you're thinking about applying either manure or fertilizer to? So basically, this layer takes in topography, so meaning the soil type and slope, and these things were previously modeled. So with the previous models that are utilized, these along with current weather forecasts are used to determine the current model of soil saturation that you see in your picture right here. So the fun part now, the runoff risk itself. So we're looking at all these different things to see what is our runoff risk for that day. And so you'll notice to the bottom left there, there's a legend, a key to kind of help you determine what the different colors on the map look like. So this one specifically is the runoff risk forecast. And then the next slide, we're going to talk about the winter runoff risk forecast. So kind of like we mentioned before, the runoff risk forecast was derived from real-time precipitation and temperature forecasts from the National Weather Service. So it combines snowmelt, soil moisture, and landscape characteristics in order to forecast runoff events. In the picture you see here, there are 4 different categories of risk over the course of 24 hours. And essentially too, you can think about that risk in terms of the magnitude of an event. So small events, so small rain events are a lower risk, whereas those larger events are at a higher risk. And a lot of the reason that the tool is better at predicting those higher risk events and the occurrence of runoff is that there's more confidence when we're talking about larger events, because we know that larger events are what transport the most nutrients off field. So if you look at the legend there, you'll notice that there is a clear box and it says no runoff expected. So that means little to no runoff is predicted during that time period, so over the course of the next 24 hours. The yellow, the light yellow, is low. So the risk of runoff occurring is minor. The next one is orange, which is moderate. And in this case, the risk of runoff occurring is moderate. And this is a time to consider other factors as far as slope of fields, what is the distance to some of the nearest surface waters you have, and kind of helping determine if it makes sense to spread or if maybe you shouldn't spread. Is there a different field you could spread on potentially? And then the last one in this category is red. This is severe, so meaning there is a high risk of runoff occurring, and that's where we're really kind of thinking, okay, do I really need to spread today? Do I have a different field I can spread on as well? So there's also what we call winter mode. So when the winter runoff risk forecast occurs, you can see in the lower left-hand corner again, in the red box, there is a winter runoff risk forecast over the next 10 days. So it's not quite as tight as the other runoff risk forecast, but essentially the winter runoff risk occurs when one of two things is happening. And it doesn't have to be both things, it's just one or both. So if the depth of snow is greater than 1 inch, the tool will put itself into the winter mode. And then the second portion of that then would be when the top 2 inches of the soil have a 3-day average soil temperature that's below freezing. So that would be considered frozen ground. So if either of those two things are happening, then the tool is put in a winter mode. So you can see that there is blue coloration and there's also purple. So the blue is considered winter conditions. So in the legend, it says there's no runoff expected, but there is the likelihood of runoff potentially in the future. And then the severe is purple. So the risk of runoff occurring predicted in the next 10 days is pretty high at that point. So today is a great example of where we're probably going to see higher risk of runoff because we have a lot of precipitation coming into play here, warming temperatures. So we're probably in some areas in the south going to see some potential snow melt. So and then there's another feature with the runoff risk forecast. So this is where you can actually click on the map for a specific location. So you're able to see the daily risk of runoff for the next 7 days. So you can see in the picture here, this was taken back in the summer. We had a low risk the first 2 days, and then it was predicting no runoff expected for the next 5 days after that. So the idea of this is that as you move further out day-wise, the predictions do become less accurate. So that's why it's important that we're kind of checking back, especially for those 24-hour totals, to make sure that we have a good idea of what the predicted runoff forecast looks like. But this is a really great tool to have to kind of see what the next 7 days look like as well. So a few other things about the tool, there are several features that are really nice. So if you look at the picture to your right, you'll notice on the right-hand side, there's kind of this, essentially there's a toolbar here where it says login and alert information. If you look there, you'll notice a tab that says, how do I use this map? So when you click on that, you can then click under a tab that says using this map, which is what brings us to the left side of the slide here. So sorry to jump around on you, but the using this map tool essentially helps explain the grid sizing we kind of talked about as far as the 6 square mile grid spaces on the tool itself. It helps explain the runoff risk categories. So we just kind of went through that, but it also explains it in detail here too. And it also has pop-up boxes within each grid that display the watershed name, the precipitation forecast over the next 7 days, and what that runoff risk will look like over the next 7 days. And then if we go back to the picture on the right under the heading tutorials, you'll notice that there is a red box in the upper right-hand corner that has tutorials. So if you click on tutorials, it'll essentially help you navigate the tool step by step, as well as creating an account and a specific alert for your location. So it's a really helpful tutorial system that you can go through, and it helps kind of explain the different layers of the map as well. So just another way to look at it from what we're talking about today. So the really fun thing about this tool is that you can actually create an account or and an alert for yourself. So about 6 in the morning, if there's going to be runoff risk potentially, I'm getting an email and I'm getting a text to tell me that the area I have identified as an alert area has a potential risk of runoff. So we'll start with an account. So to create an account, in the upper right-hand corner, outlined in red, there is a login button. So you'll click on that and it'll bring up this box that you see displayed on your screen here. So you can either log in right away if you have an account right there with your username and password. You can reset an account if you want to use a different account, but then it also allows you to create an account, and it'll take you through, once you hit create an account, it'll take you through step by step. It's pretty foolproof to be able to create an account. When you create an account for yourself, you can actually draw your farm specific fields, which is really nice. So even though the actual tool itself is not quite field specific, it does help you to see within that field, what does my runoff risk look like? And then that also allows you, when you create an account, to create an email and text alert for yourself. So if you go over to the picture on your right under the heading Create an Alert, on the right-hand side of that picture, you'll notice there is a Login and Alert Information tab, and if you click on that, you can actually click on the button within that tab that says Create an Email Alert. So that allows you to create an email alert without being logged in, but I would suggest creating an account, logging in, because then you're able to not only create an email alert, but you're also able to create a text alert, which is really nice for those of us who don't necessarily have email on our phone. So the way you create an alert is you can either click on the map for a specific location, or it'll allow you to enter an address, so you can see what that would look like as well. So whatever preference you have. Some other considerations are some farming practices. So the tool cannot take into account what specific farming practices you are potentially, or your producers are potentially doing on their farms. So that's why it's really important to consider field characteristics. For instance, what is the slope of the field? How likely is that field to experience erosion problems? And then what is the phosphorus index of that field? We take into account the phosphorus index because if we have a field with high phosphorus, you know, applying more manure to it is probably not a great idea, especially since we end up losing a lot of those nutrients off the field then in runoff risk situations. So the other thing you can do too, if you look on the picture to the right there, there is a tab outlined in red that says resources for manure applications. You can actually find additional resources here. And in there, we have manure management and utilization GAMPs based on the most current manure and utilization GAMPs. So that information we try to update every year just to make sure we're staying current, but it has a lot of great information as far as specifics with your farming operation. The other consideration, we kind of touched on this a little bit, would be distance to surface water. So if you have fields that are really close to surface water and there's potentially that moderate risk for runoff, that's where you maybe want to start looking at other fields to spread that manure or those nutrients instead. And then additionally, the timing of the application, like we kind of talked about. So weather forecasts, seasonal conditions, and then the type of manure, and are you planning to incorporate that manure? So are you a no-till operation? Are you a conservation tillage operation? Again, these are things that the tool can't predict, but these are things that can help you utilize the tool in the best way possible and to best be advantageous for your practices and your farming operation. Okay, so I think we will go ahead and turn it over to Megan for some questions and answers, and hopefully we can answer those questions for you guys.
Yes, great. Thank you, Erica, for sharing all that information related to the Enviro Impact tool. We have received some questions and we will be addressing those now. Again, if you would like to submit any questions that you have related to the Michigan Enviro Impact Tool, please use the question and answer feature. It's found at the bottom of the Zoom window. Next to, at the bottom of the window, you'll see something that says Q&A. And you can click and type in your questions there and we will address them now. So one question, Erica, was related to the winter forecast. So I don't know if you could go back to that slide to clarify what the runoff prediction is, and then just going back to those two different categories.
Okay, sorry, can you state that question again for me?
Yeah, so can you clarify what are the predictors for the winter runoff forecast?
Yes. Okay.
And the purple versus the blue categories. I know it's a little hard to see with the limited purple, but I did check the forecast for today, and it is a great visual. Half of the state has a severe winter runoff forecast.
Okay, great. So the first part of that question, what are the two indicators that would put the tool into a winter runoff forecast mode? So the first one would be if the depth of snow is greater than 1 inch. And then the second indicator would be when there is a 3-day average soil temperature in the top 2 inches of soil that is below freezing, meaning the ground would be considered frozen within that top 2-inch layer. And again, this is kind of derived from National Weather Service predictions and such. And Megan, feel free to jump in if you want to add anything. So those are the two indicators for the winter runoff risk forecast. And only one of those indicators needs to be occurring for the tool to go into that winter runoff forecast mode. It doesn't have to be both. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. And then the second part of the question, just some clarification of the purple versus the blue. So the blue is essentially, there is the likelihood of runoff to potentially occur within the next 2 days because winter conditions exist, but it doesn't mean it's going to occur right away or that it's a very, very high risk necessarily. When it is purple, however, then the risk of runoff occurring in the next 10 days is high. So again, a day like today where we've got some warming, we've had snow, now the temperatures are getting warm, so we're probably going to see some snow melt. And that tends to be one of the big issues in winter that triggers the winter runoff risk forecast to become severe, is a lot of that snow melt and such. And when we get some of those warmer temperatures like that. So you'll probably see this a lot in the spring as well. In fact, this picture was taken last April when we were having some of those snow melt type conditions. So, and I guess something else to consider, and this is kind of a blip from one of the developers of the tool. So it doesn't mean, so he said, remember to cause the purple, we don't hold back for runoff present. So even if the slightest amount of runoff is predicted on winter conditions, it will trigger the severe category. So even those even those very small events that would normally be ignored, in winter, we tend to be more cautious about that. So they're looking at potentially putting on a threshold in the future with this, but they're kind of looking for feedback with that. So if you guys have some thoughts, please feel free to share them.
Great. And Erica, thank you for addressing that question. We have another one related to how many farmers are currently using this tool. I pulled up our reporting data from August to share. So as of the end of August, we had 35 user accounts that have been created. So that's a rough estimate of the number of users currently using the tool as of August 2018. You do not need to be a farmer specifically to use this tool. I personally have created this to use at my house for when gardening, just to have a better understanding of when I should apply nutrients. So this is any type of user that has created an account, but Erica can share some of the education and outreach she has done targeted specifically related to farmers and agriculture producers to give more information about how we're getting the word out to that audience.
Yeah, great question. So yeah, off the top of my head, since August, I know we have had an uptick in users. I just can't remember the exact number right off the top of my head, but some of the programming that we've been doing, for instance, a lot of conservation districts are asking for presentations regarding the Michigan Enviro Impact Tool, and there's typically quite a few farmers and producers that are attending those meetings. So I have one tomorrow that I'm going to actually to share about the tool. So we're doing that. We also have a presentation next week at the Midwest Fish and Wildlife Conference, where we're going to be sharing a little bit about this tool as well. So again, it's not just the farmers and agriculture necessarily. It's other communities and other sectors that can use this tool as well. So I know that the Waste to Worth conference, which is held in Minnesota this year, is a great place where a lot of farmers, a lot of extension specialists from other states are coming in, and they'll be learning about this tool as well. So a lot of different opportunities. We also have put out some extension articles regarding the Enviro Impact Tool. And I know we also have some great partners within other agricultural businesses that have been really helpful in spreading the word as well. And I do think that that's helped increase the numbers that we've seen with this tool. And I think the fact that it's relatively easy to use is also very helpful too.
Great, thank you. And then just as a follow-up to that question, how have the farmer response been to this tool and this training thus far? Has it been positive?
So far, what I've seen, it has been positive. I know there's always concern, is this just another tool? Is this actually going to be beneficial? But again, I think, for instance, one of the conservation meetings I was at about a month and a half ago, the conservation district did a poll to see how many farmers could see themselves potentially using this tool, not just looking at it, but using it. And I believe it was above 90% of the participants said this is something they could see themselves using. And I think something else to consider with this tool, it's really great for small farms because you don't necessarily have somebody on speed dial like some of your larger farms do to tell you when to and when not to spread that manure. And so this is a really great tool in small farm, medium farm situations where you want to make sure that you're doing the right thing by the environment. And because it's pretty self-explanatory and pretty easy to use, I think it's a really great tool to have in your arsenal as a way to help with nutrient management.
Great, thank you. So we have two more questions, but I do want to just be conscious of time. It is 12:33, so we will work to address these questions. If anyone needs to leave the webinar, we will be sharing the recording with everyone afterwards. But we received another question related to the confidence level. So do you know what is the % confidence level to determine runoff risk for this tool?
Ooh, that might be a good question to send to our developer as well. I'm not 100% sure on the confidence level, and Megan, maybe you remember some of our conversations with him that might indicate that. I know they're feeling better about the confidence of it because they have decreased the size. They've been able to make those grid sizes smaller, which is good because that helps to increase the confidence of the tool appropriately predicting the runoff risk forecast. But that's definitely something I'd want to check with the developer about to see what they have observed as far as confidence.
Okay, that sounds great. And we can share that response via email with all registrants.
Yeah, yep, absolutely.
Okay, and then our last question was related to nutrient infiltration and soil profile, and whether or not setbacks from ditches or surface water are incorporated into that as well.
So at this point, as far as the tool is concerned, those specifics I do not believe are necessarily incorporated into the tool. I think that's something more where um, that the user needs to be aware of those setback distances of their specific fields. The tool does take into consideration the soil types and the slopes of the general area that it's in. But as far as setback distances, that's very specific to the operation that you're working with. So that's something that the user would need to be conscious of as far as where they're spreading those nutrients.
Great. Well, thank you so much for addressing that question as well. And I would like to take this moment to thank all of our attendees for participating in this webinar. This project and education outreach was supported with funds from NOAA and then also support from the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. So we really appreciate you taking the time today to learn more about the Michigan Enviro Impact Tool. We encourage all of you to create an account, and please let us know if you have any additional questions, and feel free to share information about the Michigan Enviro Impact Tool with any nutrient applicators that you know or you yourself may be interested in creating an account.
Thank you so much. We're glad you guys were able to join.